Hey, come on in. Doors open. Yeah, come on. Welcome to the Alyosha Society. We're pursuing truth and beauty and goodness through great literature. Friends, this is a very special video. This is the first video, not merely of one book, but of an entire course. That's right. Great Books 1. Well, you say, Mr. Etter, if you have a Great Books 1, you must have a Great Books 2. Oh, yes. And a 3 and a 4. So let me explain, since this is the beginning of the beginning of the beginning, how they're all kind of divided up chronologically. This is Great Books 1. So we're starting at the very, very, very beginning. We're going to go back as far as we can. We're going to begin with one of the oldest pieces of literature ever composed, called the Epic of Gilgamesh. And this is the first of 5 total videos that we're going to do on the Epic of Gilgamesh. So in Great Books 1, which is basically the ancient time period, we will go all the way up to roughly the time of Christ, So we'll cover all the BC time period. In Great Books 2, we'll pick up the action from there and read great works of literature from there until about, let's say, 1600-ish, Reformation, post-Reformation. Great Books 3 will pick up the action right there, let's say around 1600, and take us to World War I, maybe a little bit before the turn of the century. So let's say 1900. And then I think that studying the modern era is extremely important in terms of getting a better understanding of why our culture is the way it is today. So that's why in Great Books 4, I only cover about 100 years, or maybe even a little bit less, because I really want to spend some quality time on the 20th century and a little bit in the 21st century to get us up to the current time. So welcome everybody to Great Books 1, and welcome to video number 1 out of 5 total, which we're going to be studying, debating, analyzing, applying the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, as is the case with every course I teach, there are videos or video that I'd like you to watch before you begin the course. You don't need to turn it off now if you haven't watched this video, but put it on your to-do list. Try to get it done as soon as possible. And it's a video called 7 Reasons for Studying Literature. 7 Reasons for Studying Literature. Kind of want to get that into your noggin before we dive into the literature. So don't forget that. I'll try to remind you. Friends, we got a lot to do. Let's get right to it. For those of you who have taken any of my courses, you know that I like to use the PowerPoint slides. I like to make good use of them, but I don't want to just sort of rely on them constantly. I want to come back to sort of dialogue mode whenever I can, but the visuals are there to help you. The visuals are there to give you some meat, maybe some things that you could take some notes on. So if it's on a PowerPoint slide, it's probably pretty important, and it's central to what I'm going to be talking about. So here we are, the Alyosha Society, the Epic of Gilgamesh, Great Books 1. This is a very familiar slide. You will see it often. You'll see it in basically every video. I think you'll see it in every video, and you'll see it in every course, because I like you to know, where are we? Just in what's the map? Show me the road map, and then we'll get down to the nitty gritty and start driving our little cars and get to our destination. But I'm always going to show you the big picture map, and I just call it outline of videos. So I'm always going to show you this. It could be 10, it could be 12, it could be 7 or 6, whatever the case may be. This particular book, the Epic of Gilgamesh, happens to have 5 videos. 5 videos because, take a look, it's not a very long book at all. roughly about 100 pages or so. So when we read something like the Odyssey or the histories of Herodotus, they'll be 10, 12, 15, or even more, but we don't need as many for Gilgamesh. I also like to tell you right up front in the outline of videos exactly what I'm going to be doing in each video. So you see this is video number 1, and I'm going to be doing an introduction to the Epic of Gilgamesh, which means it is not required that you should have read anything yet. So what I'll do is you're always going to look at the outline of videos, look at the video that's coming up, and be sure that you've read that material before you start the video. Not the end of the world if you watch the video, then read it. But I'm just telling you the way the course is designed is for you to read and get out of it what you can get out of it. Then you come on and listen to me babble about it. So let's get right to it. I want to begin in this introductory video. I want to talk about my overall approach to literature. Like how do I teach literature and history and philosophy? Well, I call the particular approach, or I don't call it, a lot of people call it this, I didn't make up this name, the historical biographical approach. What that essentially means is that when I am trying to figure out what does a piece of literature mean, what does it mean, what I'm saying, and this is not, okay, every literature teacher does not hold this view, so I'm telling you what my view is up front. I believe that learning about the author and the time period, the context in which the author is writing is extremely important in understanding the literature. Now, here's the thing. If you understand what you're reading a lot better, then you'll enjoy it more. Friends, I've been teaching a really, really long time. I know you can tell by looking at me. I'm not a young guy. And I've heard students over the years many, many, many times say, oh, I hate books, I hate reading, blah, blah, blah. No, they don't. They think they do, but they don't. The reason students say I hate books and I hate reading is because they don't understand what they're reading. If someone could come alongside that person and help them understand it better, they'll actually start to like it. Shh. All right. So that's what I'm going to be trying to do. The courses that I teach are not designed in such a way that I'm simply going to be distributing information to you. Friends, I know I risk putting myself out of business by saying this, but guys, you can get that anywhere. You can go to Wikipedia, you can go to SparkNotes, you can get that anywhere. I want to give you something here that you can't simply grab somewhere on the internet, and that is a skill. I want to teach you how to do something. And, if you want to learn how to, make beautiful pottery, for example, or how to frame a house, you can't just watch a video. At some point, you got to go out there and grab a hammer. You got to go out there and get one of those turning wheels, and you got to do it. And you got to have somebody beside you to say, look, here's how you do it. And that is what I'm doing in these literature courses here at the Alyosha Society. So the approach is called the historical biographical approach. What that means is we'll be looking at the author. Every book we study, who wrote the book? When did they write the book? Why did they write the book? What was this person's worldview? What impacted this person, if we can know those things? Why did this person write? To whom was this person writing? Now, friends, I'm going to tell you straight up, the older the work of literature, and the Epic of Gilgamesh, as I said earlier, is one of the oldest, if not the oldest known piece of literature. I mean, like on the planet. Now, were there things written before this? Sure, probably. We just don't know what they would be because we don't have record. So this is extremely old. So the older the piece of literature, the more difficult it is to get answers to these questions. But we're still going to do the best we can. To whom did the person write? What do we know about the time period? The geography is important. And then, if you've never heard the word genre, that's an important word. Genre is just a fancy pants term that means the kind or the type of writing it is. What do we mean by that? Well, if you like music, I'm assuming you like music. Different genres of music would be, let's say, jazz, pop, rap, classical, country. Okay, those are different genres of music, different genres of literature, historical fiction, autobiography, novel, essay. I mean, there's tons of them. So the genre is going to impact how you understand the literature. And what did I say earlier? It's a promise I made and a promise I'm going to keep. If you understand it, you'll like it, at least more than you did when you were fumbling about. Friends, look, think about it. If your math level is around Algebra 1 and someone throws you into a Calc 3 class, you're going to hate it. But you're not going to hate it because math is dumb or stupid or boring. You're going to hate it because you're going to be lost and you're just not going to know what's going on, and it's going to lead to frustration. But if you slowly worked your way up and learned the material, then you may be one of those weirdos, wouldn't be me, but one of those weirdos who can actually do Calc 3 and love it. That's the key. Now, I want to warn you ahead of time. I always feel like I have to apologize when I share this analogy because it is so overused. But friends, listen, it's overused because it's true. So I can't help that. I didn't make this up. I know a lot of people use this analogy. It's about fishing. I know you've probably heard it before. Sorry, my dog seems to be wanting to check things out a bit. Let me check on him and then I'll be right back. You know, one of the things I love about what I do here at the Alyosha Society is, it's raw. Okay, this is grassroots, salt of the earth stuff here. All right, my recording studio is in my house, and my dog is in my house. I do try to keep those interruptions to a minimum. Okay, let's get right back to it. I was apologizing. But the analogy, guys, it's just really good. And it applies to the way I teach literature. You know the saying that if somebody is hungry and you simply give them food, then you will feed them for one day. And that's a good thing. But if you could teach that person how to find food on their own, then maybe that person would learn how to feed him or herself for the rest of the life. And that's okay. So teach a man how to fish and you feed him for life. That is, friends, that's exactly what I want to do as a teacher. Not just sort of spoon feed you information. That's sort of like feeding you for a day. I want to teach you how to fish. I want to teach you how to read a book, because it is a skill. I'm not talking about mere literacy. I'm not talking about just reading words off the page. I'm talking about how to intelligently and effectively read, understand, and therefore enjoy a work of literature. So that's what I'm all about. And let's get right to it. One of the ways that I do this is by using what I call the literary toolbox. I used the analogy earlier of framing a house or learning how to do pottery. So let's go to a toolbox. There are 5 tools in my literary toolbox. There could be many others. I'm just going to teach you how to use 5 of them. And if you learn how to use these tools properly, literature, the world of literature is going to open up to you and you're going to enjoy it a lot more. What are these 5 tools? Historical context, biographical context, genre questions. I'll explain that one later. We also have literary devices and elements of a plot. Now, Depending upon the work of literature, depending upon the genre, we may only use 2 of these tools or 3 of these tools. We don't necessarily use every tool with every book, although we could. So let me start teaching you how to use these tools. You'll see that I've kind of highlighted biographical context. So let's get that tool out of the toolbox and let me show you what I mean by it. Biographical context simply means who wrote this work of literature that you're reading. How can you find out as much as you can about this person? Well, friends, right off the bat, I got some bad news. we don't really know who wrote the Epic of Gilgamesh. We don't. It's just too old. I mean, it's way too. You look at the date I have there, guys. That is give or take about 4,000 years ago. So we don't know. We don't know who wrote it. So what we're going to do instead is, for our biographical context, which is going to be, I hope, very helpful, is what do we know about Gilgamesh, this person called Gilgamesh? Well, first of all, the first thing is on this slide. Gilgamesh, according to the story, and there is actually some historical evidence to back this up. So we're going to have to play around a little bit with separating fact from fiction, but I'm going to tell you right off the bat, once again, with an old piece of literature like this, that's not going to be easy. When you go through the end of Great Books 1 and get into Great Books 2 and 3, and especially Great Books 3 and 4, then the literary toolbox just kind of starts to explode, because we know enough information about all 5 of the tools to really make the best use of them. So we're looking at 2100 BC. Now, friends, when you see a date like that, unless you are already a trained and extremely knowledgeable historian, you should ask yourself, okay, whoa, wait a second. Give me some kind of context. Give me some kind of bearing. Like if I would have been living in the year 2100 BC and gone down to the local gas station, Walmart or Target, and picked up a newspaper. I know we live in a digital age. People don't even read newspapers anymore. But if they did, what would be the headlines? What was going on that we know of in the year 2100 BC? Well, that'll be historical context. So we're going to get to that. But what I want to do is I kind of want to, oh boy, I guess this is sort of like a teaser. I want to introduce to you a theory about this person that we call Gilgamesh. And you're thinking, why in the world do you have a passage from the first book of the Bible up there, the book of Genesis? Well, bear with me. I am going to introduce to you a theory. I'm going to tell you before we even talk about it, I don't know if this is true. I've looked at it. I think that it has some merit. It also has some problems. But just because it's out there, I want you to be familiar with it. Then I'm going to say basically, hey, if this is something that gets you excited, then go off and research it and see what you can learn about it. And here's the theory. The theory is that this man called Gilgamesh is actually mentioned in the Bible. Let's read the passage. Now, this is the genealogy of the sons of Noah. Now, remember, this is right after the flood. So, God destroyed the entire world. The only people left in the world are Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and their wives. That's it. 8 people. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. You've probably memorized those names from some Sunday school classes. And sons were born to them after the flood. Okay, let's look at this genealogy here. The sons of Japheth were Gomer and Magog. From these, the coastland peoples of the Gentiles were separated into their land. So Moses, who is the author of Genesis, is kind of giving, how did the world repopulate after the flood? And geographically, where did people go? Where did they settle? And He's going to get into all kinds of things with geography and languages and so forth. But come down with me to verse 6. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, and Cush. Now remember, so Cush is a son of Ham, although let me just say this really quickly. One of the things about genealogies in the Old Testament is that it was not uncommon for Moses, when he was writing this, to skip generations. I know that's kind of frustrating. So, when it says the sons of Ham were, Cush could have been a son of Ham, and he could have been a grandson of Ham. And I don't want to get into that. It's just one of those little tricky things about genealogies. Cush begat Nimrod. And he began, now Nimrod, I know what you're thinking. Nimrod doesn't look anything like Gilgamesh. I know that. But Nimrod is the person that some historians believe might be the same man as Gilgamesh. Here's what Genesis tells us about this man named Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one on the earth. That's consistent with Gilgamesh. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore, it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And in the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech. Now, the word Erech here in Hebrew is, again, I'm not going to dive into the details. You can run with it. Is apparently, scholars are fairly certain that that is referring to the ancient Babylonian city of Uruk. Well, guys, that's the city where Gilgamesh not only lived, but he was apparently the king of Uruk. And then the passage goes on. So what did I say? Is Nimrod Gilgamesh? What I said is that I don't know. I'm going to add it to my belly button list. You know what I mean by the belly button list? All the questions that you're going to ask when you get to heaven because you didn't know the answer to them. Why is it called a belly button list? Come on, because that's the first one. Did Adam and Eve have a belly button? I mean, God just kind of created them. So, is Nimrod the same? There's not enough time here to dive into it. Have at it. There are some compelling arguments, but here's what we do know. Here's what we kind of sort of do know. We know where these events took place, and we know roughly when the Epic of Gilgamesh was written. And in looking at just those two little tidbits of information, it is possible that Abraham and Gilgamesh would have been living on the earth at the same time. Why would I say that? Well, friends, biblical scholars date Abraham around 2000 BC. Gilgamesh supposedly written around 2000 BC. Men and women did live longer lives back then, so that would make it maybe a little bit more likely that their lives could have overlapped. Do we know it for sure? No, we don't know it for sure. But here's another thing we do know. Look at the map on this slide. Do you see where Uruk is? Down there, look way down in the southern part. See where it says Sumer? Okay, Uruk and are right next to each other. Abraham was from and Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk. So friends, and knowing that Abraham was probably a fairly prominent character in this part of the world, in other words, people probably knew who he was. He was supposedly a wealthy guy. Gilgamesh being a prominent figure, it is very possible that they would have at least known about the other person. Now, I find that interesting. And a little bit later, I'm going to explain to you why I think this makes reading and studying the Epic of Gilgamesh particularly exciting when it comes to enhancing your biblical knowledge. We'll get into that later. Now, here's what I want you to see, guys. Now, take a look at this. There's that, there's this, there's that, there's this. Notice that the two rivers coming out of the Gulf are the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They're mentioned from the very, very beginning of the Bible. But those two rivers and the land between them and around them form what we call, in the ancient world, what we call Babylon or Mesopotamia. And the word Mesopotamia literally means between the rivers. Patmos, Greek word for river, meso, in between. So, but what I want you to know what that is today. All right, now look at it, keep an eye on it. Don't blink. Bam. Yes, it's the country of Iraq. So modern day Iraq is ancient Babylon or Mesopotamia, same place. So that's kind of cool. So next time you're watching the news and you see something going on in Iraq, you can say, hey, I know what was going on there about 4,000 years ago. So I want you to keep that in mind. But look at the proximity of the cities. Just something to think about. You see, guys, in really getting the most we can out of a work of literature, we want to dig up every piece of information we can. What we don't want to do is stretch things out in such a way that we make something what we want it to be. So if we don't know for sure, then we just say, hey, it looks possible, but we don't know for sure. Let's go back now to our literary toolbox. I like to put myself in there. I don't know. I like the smell of tools. It's just kind of fun. So we've already looked at biographical context. A little bit frustrating because the truth is we don't really know much. So what about historical context? And if you've noticed, I've already blended the two of them together, sort of. Now, frequently for historical context, I'll be using a timeline, but not always. I thought for this one, a timeline will be helpful. Here we go. I want to start at 3000 BC. Friends, when we get back to 3000 BC, and then before that, we get into what we call prehistory. That doesn't mean that nothing happened. It means that the farther we go back, the more we are getting into time periods for which we have no writing. So we can look at fossils, we can look at, archaeological evidence and such, but we don't necessarily have things that were written from that time period. It doesn't mean that nothing was written. It just means we don't have it. It's just too long ago. So I want you to take a look here, friends. I put a question mark by Noah because we don't know when the flood took place. So I just stuck it way over on the left. We don't know when God created everything. We just simply don't know. Scientists take good guesses, but they're all over the map with their guesses, and we're not even going to talk about that here. Notice I have the timeline in 500-year increments, and I put Moses up there, and I put David. So David is around 1000 BC, maybe 900-ish. Moses, remember Moses leads God's people out of Egypt. They cross over, God divides the waters, they wander in the wilderness, and they cross over the Jordan and enter the promise. You know the story. That's around 1500 BC. Roughly, guys, I'm using really big general terms. So where do our characters come into play? So there's Abraham and there's Gilgamesh. Now, I kind of put them offset just a teeny bit, but to be honest with you guys, I think that we're a little bit more certain about dating for Abraham because we have much, much, much more information biblically that we can research. With Gilgamesh, we don't have as much, but the best guesses would be really close to the same time period. So in other words, when God came to Abram, remember that was his name before Abraham, in Ur, he didn't know God. Guys, he didn't know the true and living God. He was likely worshiping false gods. And God came to him and said, I want you to leave Ur. I want you to leave everything behind. And I'm not even going to tell you where we're going to go. you will follow me. I am Yahweh. I am the true and living God, the creator of the universe. Drop everything and follow me, and then you have faith in me, and I'll tell you where to go. And Abraham had faith. Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness, the book of Genesis tells us. But remember, when God did that, that was this close, okay, on a map, I know, to the city of Uruk. So when we read the Epic of Gilgamesh, and we look at their gods and their customs and their culture, some of which, to be quite honest with you, is pretty disgusting and pagan, then guys, we are learning the kind of life and culture that Abraham would have probably been immersed in before God called him out of it. I think that's pretty cool. So that enhances our understanding of Scripture. Back to the literary toolbox. Let me put myself in the box. So we've already looked at historical context and biographical context. The last thing I want to do in this video is genre questions. Remember, we said genre is a type or kind. So what is this? Is it an essay? Is it a poem? Is it historical fiction? Glad you asked. It's what we call, I got to figure out where to position myself, an epic. It's an epic. Now, I know sometimes we're tempted to say things like, dude, that pizza I had last night was like totally epic. Look, the pizza might have been really good, guys. Might have even been like, 3 cheese pizza, and I'm into it. But it's not really epic. Okay, the word epic has a very specific definition, and I am going to help you to know what that definition is by using the word epic itself as an acronym. So here we go, EPIC. I want you to memorize this. I want you to know it. It's going to come up in our discussions. EPIC. An epic is an extremely, that's the E, an extremely long poem. That's the P. Yeah, I know it doesn't look like a poem, but it is actually written in meter, which means it's poetry. An extremely long poem. What's the I? About an incredible hero that highlights a particular culture. That's the C. EPIC. What is an epic? An extremely long poem about an incredible hero that highlights a culture. Now, is this an extremely long poem? Look, when we get to the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Aeneid, give or take about 15,000 lines, that's extremely long. But this is certainly long compared, let's say, to a Shakespearean sonnet, which is only 14 lines. Roses are red, violets are blue. I love great books 1, and so should you. You see, when you look at little poems or haikus, this is actually pretty long. About an incredible hero. Who's the incredible hero? Gilgamesh. Now, keep in mind, when we say incredible hero, we don't mean that he was good in every way. It just means that he was extraordinary in some way. It might be bad. Okay, the Iliad is about Achilles and his anger. It's not a good thing. That highlights a culture. What's the culture that we're learning about when we read this epic? Babylonian culture, ancient Babylonian culture. So here it is. There it is. Extremely long poem about with an incredible hero that highlights a culture over on the left-hand side. Now, I want to wrap up with this. Now that we know it's an epic, what I'm going to be giving you is every time we do a new book, we're going to find out what the genre is for that work of literature. And then I'm going to have a set of, let's say, I don't know, 6 to 10 questions that are general questions that you would ask anytime and every time you're reading that genre. Does that make sense? So in other words, we'll come back to it. The next time we read an epic, which by the way, the next book we're doing is the Odyssey. So we will be coming right back to these same questions. What are they? First of all, can you decipher what type of poetry it is? Now, guys, with Homer, that's going to be a lot easier. I'm going to tell you ahead of time that scholars have had a bit of a tough time with this ancient Babylonian language that was used when this was written, and we don't even know who wrote it. So we're not going to get quite as far with that, but that's okay. Still going to know the questions. And if we do decipher the kind of poetry, like for example, in the Iliad and the Odyssey, Homer employs a technique called dactylic hexameter. I know that doesn't mean anything now. Talk about it later. Shakespeare frequently uses what we call iambic pentameter. So we'll talk later about, well, what does that mean? And how does that help me understand it better? Third question, what is the incredible hero like? Should I be like this person? What are his or her qualities? Or is it true that maybe the author is saying, hey, here's an extraordinary person, don't be like that? What culture is highlighted? We already said that. It's Babylonian culture. And what aspects of it might the author be trying to highlight? I think that'd be a good way to put it. And should we want our culture to be like that? Is there a political or religious or philosophical agenda? Whoever wrote this, are they trying to like lure me over to some kind of worldview? Well, that's okay if they are. I just want to know it ahead of time. And then I want to know if the worldview they're luring me into is a good one or a bad one. So this is what we call the genre tool out of the toolbox. Anytime you come across a work of literature that is an epic, we're going to pull out these questions and walk through them. So friends, the first video is a little bit longer than I like. Most of my videos, I like to keep them at 20 to 25 minutes, but I do the best I can. This has been video number 1 of 5 total videos we're doing on the Epic of Gilgamesh. Also, video number 1 of the entire course, Great Books 1. Remember I said earlier, you should have, you'll need to go ahead and read tablets 1, 2, and 3 before checking out the next video. And, oh yeah, one more thing. 7 reasons to study literature. Remember, I wanted you to get that done ASAP if you haven't already done it. See you in video 2, friends.